Hey everyone, and welcome back to Citywide Blackout, your home for music, movies, and more. I'm your host, Max Bowen. It was during 2020 that Mark Bernal began working with various illustrators, creating the first pages of lesser-known comics. Since then, it's grown to a 14-person company with writers and artists from around the world. In this episode, Bernal and Writer Illustrator Rey Garza talk about the origins of LKC and how it's grown so much over just 2 years. Garza shares the launch of his own title, Tank McGreggor, one of my personal favorites, a comedic sci-fi action title with one of the most unique characters I've ever encountered. We also look at the world of indie comics and how things have changed, allowing more creators to pursue their dreams. So let's start with just the beginning of lesser-known comics. How did this whole thing get started?
It was, quarantine. A lot of people, you're at home and you're reevaluating your life decisions. And I talked to my wife. I was always into, playing music and other sort of creative endeavors. And I said I wanted to start just making a comic book myself, and I started working with 3 concept artists to do concept art, and fell in love with all 3 of them. And so I was like, oh, I guess we're gonna have to make 3 stories that kind of like intersect. And we started posting everything they were working on Instagram, and they just started attracting, more and more followers, and then more and more comic creators who said, oh, can I make a comic with you guys? And I self-admittedly, I got in over my head. Next thing I know, I look up and we got 14 plus creators we're working with, and then not to mention the ones that are doing variant covers or doing this, that, and the other thing for us, and then support staff that it takes to kind of help with that, everything from graphic design to web design to editing and all that stuff. So I joke because my wife was like, I gave you permission to make a comic, not a comic book company, and Ray's been one of the most recent ones, and just an amazing creator. We're just so lucky to have him.
I said you could do one comic, not do a whole company. But was that ever in your thinking, when you started to do just the one title, hey, maybe you could do a company someday if this gets better?
Not really. I still play music, occasionally, but it's usually just I have friends that do it professionally, but we'll get together and we'll record songs together and, maybe play a show or something, but it's not something that I had considered as a, professional endeavor. But one of our initial creators, Katie Drinkwine, she told me what it's kind of like out there for artists, she's also an avid video gamer, and she's like, what am I going to bust my ass to work for a company Blizzard, and you hear the horror stories coming from there, right? So what's the pinnacle for me? And that discussion kind of talked about led us to kind of create a mission statement with the input of our original artists, and everything that they put in that mission statement was about kind of creating a climate where treat artists like humans, and don't breathe down their neck on deadlines, and give them the creative flexibility to do the things that they want to do. We kind of turned into a half startup, half hippie commune. It's kind of best described.
Half startup, half hippie commune. I like the description. Yeah, reading about the company, I did see that you really put a lot of emphasis on things like the work-life balance, creative freedom. What do you say that the overall environment is with the industry as a whole?
Well, I think something like Tank McGregor is probably a good example for what I have envisioned. Ray, it wouldn't surprise me a year from now that somebody drives a dump truck full of money up to Ray's house and says, hey, bring this book somewhere else, and we want to be an incubator where somebody comes, they get started, they, do their thing. We all learn from each other. and Ray goes and takes that property to go make a bajillion dollars on a bunch of other endeavors, and then he comes back and makes something new with us, because he's like, hey, I like those guys, they did well by me, and that's what if I'm going to start something again from scratch, this is where I would probably do that. And so we don't have huge ambitions to be some big monolith in the industry. More of just like a place that for people to come and be a part of, kind of as long as they like, or to whatever degree that their lifestyle accommodates, whether they're a full-time comic book creator, or if they have a day job and they're doing this, they're really talented, but they're doing this in their spare time.
How'd you go about meeting like the other members of the team? Because looking at their backgrounds, like you've got a very global group here.
A lot of them, reached out to me. The first international person was Franco. He was one of the original concept artists. Just met him on a freelance art, to find artists to hire. And then Abel Garcia, he's from Spain. He's a sweetheart. He actually did when we had like 2 followers, on social media. He's like, oh, like I'll help you out. I'll make this sketch for you, and hopefully drive some followers over to your account. And we just kept connecting, and I said I'd love for you to make books with us. And then after that, yeah, it's a real global audience. There's a ton of amazing creators from Canada, and there's something in the water in South America where they're just like cranking out amazing art. And I think that speaks to the power of technology. Of a lot of us have not met in person. Actually, me and Ray have never met in person. So most of this is being accomplished, via, Google Share Drive and, Zoom meetings or whatever. So it's, that's definitely taken the shackles off of, our geographic reach.
All right. Let's talk a bit about the titles, because you have some pretty amazing titles. And Ray, I want to turn this over to you now, because you are the creator. Of course, you are the writer, illustrator of the McGreggor series, which I just started reading, and I'm already like totally hooked on this thing. I love like the art and the humor of it too.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm curious as to where this idea came from.
It's funny because I don't recall there being like a point where I I didn't like dream of it and like I woke up and like this is what something that has to be happening, Like I've always had an interest in science fiction, and obviously the book is very inspired by like action movies of the 80s and 90s, and just like the solitary like big muscular heroes like the Schwarzeneggers and the Van Dams. So that's always been like in my head, and I've always drawn. I've drawn since I was a little kid. I love drawing. I never really had made a comic before or anything that had to do with sequential art beyond the tiny things I made before I was 10, and the inspiration for it, I mean, like, again, it just sort of came in parts. I wrote it initially as just an exercise in dialogue. It started out as a 15-page script, formatted like a movie script, but it had no actions. It was just 15 pages of dialogue. And it was just me like writing it was like 5 hours probably that day of just like trying to fit in as much quirkiness and like jokes and outlandish things that I was never gonna film or make in any way or form. And then I forgot about it. And about a year later, I rediscovered it. I'm like, oh, this is not bad. But obviously I can't make this, and I'm not going to animate it, which I think it will work best as an animation. So I'm just going to start making it as a sequential art, as a comic. And then I started playing around with designs for McGreggor. I had, when I was at work and when I had some downtime, I would just doodle. And if you look at the back of the book, you see all those initial designs. And when I'm playing with the ideas of his helmet, his jacket, what kind of this, what kind of that, I got really into the Hellboy series, and I saw how Mike Mignola did comics, and that just really inspired me to just go ahead and start it. and I just started drawing, and I didn't stop. Well, that's not true. I did stop a couple of times, only because, it's my own insecurities. You do something and you're like, this is not good enough, and you stop, and then you bring it back a month later. Oh, this is not so bad, and you continue it. And other times I would get stuck on the story. Before I knew it, I had this pretty lengthy graphic novel, and I thought, you know what, this could actually be something. So then I would start going back, and I would redo some pages that I maybe didn't try as hard the first time, and fill in some plot holes and decide this doesn't work well, if this is going to be the arc. And I took it more seriously once I saw I had something tangible in my hands. And before I knew it, 2-3 years later, I had a book. So there wasn't really like a moment of inspiration that started it. It was just sort of like this gradual thing that I just never thought I would finish. And one day it was finished.
I get you. Now, the story of this thing I really like. So Tank is this really struggling intergalactic bounty hunter who, I don't think he's really good at his job, but he's not terrible at it either. Chasing down I just my perspective. I'm only on issue 2. I'm only on issue 2.
No, I'm joking.
maybe he gets better as it goes along.
No, that's a fair assessment. He's not the best.
Fair enough. All right. Who has to chase down a pleasure bot who has become self-aware. That's a really cool story, and they say that there are no more new ideas. But damn, man, this is a very new idea. So when it comes to just like crafting the story, do you really take a lot of time to say, okay, has this been done before? Do I have to make some changes to make it like stand out more?
Yeah, 100%. If I know that it's been done before, I can't bring myself to do it. I just can't. It actually, I've thought about this, and I think it comes from like a childhood trauma. When I was like in elementary school, and I saw this joke on like Mad Magazine or whatever, and I thought, no one is gonna know about this. Like, no one reads Mad Magazine in my like circle of friends. No one's gonna know this joke. And I went to school and I like told the joke, and I got a huge laugh. But one kid was like, "You took that from this issue," and I'm like, "Oh, damn!" And like, it was kind of really embarrassing. And like, since then, I was like, if I know about like, I can never bring myself to like take something from somewhere else and make it my own. Like, I just can't do that, which is like, you shouldn't do that. Like, it's not a personal thing of mine. Like, no one should do that. But if I think it's been done before, or if I've seen it before, I either don't do it, or I try to change it just enough to where it becomes my own. It's very hard when you've seen like every episode of Futurama, because like, oh, okay, they did this, they did that. I can't do this, I can't do that. But yeah, I do try to make it as different to me as possible. And like, I can't say I've read a giant amount of graphic novels and giant amount of comics, but I do try to do something that I haven't seen done in them. And one of the things that I hadn't personally seen done in a lot of comics was just straight up comedy, and just straight up like gag after gag, and just taking the piss out of everything. That's what I wanted most of all, is to just do like the 30 Rock of graphic novels, just like a joke a minute kind of thing. And I don't know if I succeeded. I don't think I did, but I got close, I feel.
I like it. The 30 Rock of graphic novels. It's a great tagline.
Let's use it more.
There you go. Was it hard to be done with this thing?
No, I was eager to be done with it, because I already had ideas for the second one. And I thought, I'm gonna do all these things different. And now with the knowledge that I came in with this one, I'm going to do a better job of like formatting the way I do things. When I started the first one, I was very naive to the whole process of making comics. I mean, when I didn't color it myself, I delivered to a colorist. Whenever I would do some pages, I would deliver to this colorist, Michael Woods. But I would deliver the pages with the text bubbles in it, like no layers, just straight up everything on there. And he would draw it, but then afterwards, once I had it, I had no room to like change it. I couldn't change word bubbles around or do anything with them. The page was already finished. The colors were there. So I kind of like limited myself, or I shackled myself a lot in the way that I process things. Now everything's like nicely, neatly in layers, and I have a much better like organization into everything. So once I was like near the end game of book one, I was just ready to finish it. I didn't want to go back and restructure everything and fix everything, because it was going to take me another 2 years, I felt, just the pace I was going. So I thought, I'm going to leave this the way it happened, and that's going to be it. And then I'm going to go to the next one and try to do things better.
Nice, nice. So with this thing done now, are you working on a new project?
Yeah. So Tank McGregor Volume 2 is the one I've been working on for about a year and a half now. It doesn't continue the story of it. If you read book one, you'll see that that's a very it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, it's a very self-contained tale, but the characters do continue their arcs throughout it, and I definitely established some things, and I pepper in some like clues for the characters throughout book one that I explore more in book two, and that I flesh out a little more. But the adventure itself per se is a completely different one.
Okay. Is this your first book?
It is my first book, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you. I mean, like I think Mark has told me several times how it was quite an undertaking, and I never saw it as that, again, because I had no idea that I was going to finish it or do anything with it. And I didn't know that I shouldn't have started with 121 pages. You know, I was just doing it until the story came to its natural conclusion. It's kind of those things where you make the characters, you put them in a situation, and you just kind of let them go at it. And it took them 120 pages to realize the story. You know, but yeah, I didn't know that it's recommended not to start off with a graphic novel. It's recommended to start off with like a 5-page mini comic or whatever. But yeah,
That's ambition, really.
it's naivety is what it is.
Well, there is that too. But hey, I mean, like this is like your story. You knew how long it had to be done. I think it's just as long as it tells a story in a good way, that's what counts.
No, you're right. I agree.
Now, are you entirely self-taught?
I am entirely self-taught, yes, for better or worse. I was actually having this conversation with Nico Nikamura, which is one of our artists, one of the artists at LKC. And I was admiring, we were doing a stream, we were both drawing, and I was admiring the way they draw hands and just poses. And I'm like, wow, you do really good hands. And they're like, well, I took classes. And I'm like, that's what I lacked, you know, like everything I know from like drawing hands and like particular poses, I get from reading Hellboy, and I get from other people, and I like borrow here and there, and I try to Frankenstein it into my own style. And it's a huge struggle because I always like, I feel like I can't draw hands, I can't draw cars. I struggle very much to draw women, and the female pose is like this Everest of mine. So I think if I had like art school and some proper training, I would have been able to do those things. At the same time, I do find some pride in the fact that I've just been drawing so long that people seem to like the style that I kind of fell into. I really have been drawing since I could pick up a pencil. You know, I just always been drawing. And then that led to my interest in stories, and that led to my interest in film. And then it just all circled back to my interest in graphic novels. And that's why I made a book.
Now, you say you're self-taught. I want to call bullshit on that one because this is really, really good. Just like looking at some of the initial panels, like self-taught, it's like, no, he's got to be lying or something because this is too good to be like self-taught. I mean,
Oh, thank you, man. It's
hey,
a huge compliment. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I just take from wherever I like, and I try to imitate it. And yeah, I mean, it
yeah.
just becomes its own thing.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier the art of Hellboy. Are there other like artists out there that you see as like your muses?
Mobius,
Oh, nice, nice.
100% Mobius. Jean Gerard, which if I butchered his name, I'm sorry, I'm not French. Um, but yeah, like Mike Mignola was more about the simplicity of his art. Made me think like I don't have to be a Todd McFarlane to like make a comic book. You know, you don't have to be like incredibly intricate and detailed and like have this incredible eye for art. Like for her, oh, you've seen Todd McFarlane, like his Spawn drawings are incredible. You know, but you don't have to be that. Like Mike Mignola, I love his work because it's so beautiful in its simplicity and its intricacy with light and shadow. On the opposite end, I love Mobius because he has just these like giant landscapes of like very detailed art. But again, the colors are not so crazy to where like someone who's starting out couldn't do it. You know, his desert landscapes are actually a huge inspiration for like the desert parts of in Tank McGregor. There's a huge planet that's just a desert landscape. And I was like, oh, be a little bit like Mobius, you know, and I try to be like his style, and his tendencies for science fiction are something that I really admired. And even before I knew who he was, I mean, like Fifth Element was one of my favorite movies growing up. And later I realized that Fifth Element was just all his style, you know? So it's just bled through osmosis.
Fifth Element is definitely one of the best movies out there, hands down.
Oh, agreed.
Definitely.
Yes.
All right. So, what is going to be next for you? I mean, you mentioned working on the second volume of Tank McGregor, but do you have like other titles in mind?
Yeah, I have titles in mind, and I have little 5-page one-shots and little mini stories. Like I said, I had an interest in film, and I still do, obviously, for the longest time. And I always wrote short stories and short scripts and feature scripts. And when I realized that it was just going to be too difficult to make any of those, but I still have them, I thought, oh, some of these might actually be work if I adapt them to like the comic books format. So I do definitely have a lot of ideas, a lot of tiny little things. And Tank McGregor is my main squeeze right now. That's what I want to like sort of establish. And then once I like burn out a little bit on that, I'm going to go ahead and do something completely different.
Exactly. Once you get to the point where like drawing this thing is like, oh God, this crap again, you know, it's time to kind of switch over and do something else.
I am starting to run out of poses for it's like, nope, did that one. Nope, did that one. Okay, what can I do? All right, let's try and make it. I don't know.
Oh, the pose challenge. I think that's like a Marvel's like ongoing struggle.
Well, yeah, it's like you want to draw him like doing some like cool, but like, why is he doing that? I don't know.
Yeah. Does a human body do that actually? I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. All right, Mark, back to you, man. I want to talk a bit more about the other titles. Now, you have, of course, a ton at LKC, and I've read most of them at this point. Good Night, which is a horror comic with a damn terrifying ending. Death Wish, I just read the first issue of that one. That's really cool. I know that is one of yours. You've got the Digital Legends of Doom, World Eater, Roswell. I know some you make these like in-house, but do others come from like outside creators?
Yeah. So we have two types of books. We have what we call the lesser known universe. And those started out, I don't know, I was reading a lot of like Golden Age stuff, and I thought of like action comics, and it had like, Superman, that's where he was first introduced. And then obviously he had titular role, in his own series after that. So we have lesser known comics number 1 through 7 that introduce some characters, and then they'll spin off into their own, series. And then we'll probably keep those sequential lesser known comics 8, 9, 10 and beyond to introduce, events that will trickle out into the rest of those series. So I do most of the writing for that, but we use a lot of Marvel method for that. So Death Wish is probably like the best example of that right now. So one of our characters, we decided, okay, in one of her past lives, she was, racing these demolition, derby style race cars and stuff like that. And it was a really easy one to work with Kieran Quinn, because it was, he's the illustrator, because I don't need to write pages of what action's going to look like. The dude's a visual storyteller. I kind of say, hey, here are the primary characters. Here's the setup, before the race, and here's how I want things to kind of end. And then he gets to go totally bananas on, all the detail of what the other racers are, and and which is really fun for me as a writer, because I'll be like, hey, who's this person you drew in the background? Like, we got to make them an actual character, and it was just him, thought it was something funny or cool, or just, fun to draw. So, those are the primary ones that I'm writing, but I'm even giving over some of the writing to outside writers, just because I've been so caught up on the business end. So a guy who does a podcast, Apollo City Comics, his name's Brandon Blocksdorf. Yeah, both Brandons from that show are amazing humans. But Brandon Blocksdorf, he's doing issue 3 of Death Wish. He's writing issue 3. And that's been really rewarding, because he took it in a direction that I hadn't anticipated, and I was just like, blown away with the writing. And actually the other Brandon is taking on, Brandon Moncada. He's taking on the writing of one of the lesser known comics. I think it's going to be number 14 or 15. What's nice is they can do the stuff that's way down the line, so there's not a lot of pressure, and then it makes it easier for me, because it's like, trying to manage the business end and plotting out, story arcs, for a year from now is overwhelming. But then, yeah, just like, before Ray came along, we were lucky. Guy by the name Soren Yarger, he does World Eater and Roswell. Kayla Payne, she does the Hara. And Charlie Ragnarok, she started out doing illustrations for me, but then she showed me her book, So I Worked at the Mall, the vampire cult story, and I was just like, dude, your writing is, when it comes to like the delivery of humor, like her and Ray are just like, doing amazing things. So she still does illustrations for the stuff that I write, but she's the Kickstarter after the one we're currently on will actually have the second So I Worked at the Mall book. So I'm excited, like I said, and anytime that a creator that comes along that's, willing to be patient with a new company, interact with the team and, be a team player and stuff like that, like, they're, more than welcome to put their books out with us. It's a golden age of indie comics right now. So you don't have to go very far to find just the most talented. I'm blown away by the quality of what, we've been able to put out, because I feel like I have a role obviously as the publisher, and I think I have an eye for some of these things, but they're the ones that are doing all the, the hard work. And the nice part too is that, bringing in such diverse styles, I don't think that we have somebody where it's like, oh, so-and-so is the top tier creator in this group, right? They all speak very highly of each other, and they all reach out to each other, and express admiration for maybe a certain thing that they one does well that the other is wishes they could do better themselves. So it's been really rewarding to see them kind of geek out together. Anytime you got a bunch of comic book creators like geeking out together, and just like it's like our own little like clubhouse, where we're just like kids again making comic books and selling smut on the internet.
Hey man, if it works, right?
Yeah.
There's whatever you're making, you are going to find the audience somewhere.
Yeah, I think we attract a type of creator, but there's certainly something here for everybody, because Digital Legends of Doom is an entirely different type of book than Tank McGregor, which is an entirely different book from the Hara. But for some reason, I've heard this a few times where people say, oh, that looks like a lesser known comics book. I don't know exactly what they mean by that, but they're like, these all like belong together. And I don't know, what exactly has created that dynamic, but we certainly welcome it.
Hey, you got yourself a style. That's not bad at all. Yeah. Now, you talked earlier about like indie comics, and certainly I think we are seeing that boom going on, where you're seeing companies like yours opening up. You're seeing more platforms like Webtoon, Tapas, Comixology. But what's your take on it? What are the opportunities for like the indie comic creator in 2022?
I see the indie comic scene the same way that I see what the indie music scene was like in the early 2000s, where once like Napster and all that stuff, LimeWire and all that stuff started becoming a thing, and then a bunch of other music sharing sites, you had a bunch of creators that were just like, I don't need to sell my soul to a record label and have to make 5 records that only have one good song on them, because I have to keep one hit, in the charts, to make this work. So you're seeing that explosion on both ends, right? Where you have the barrier to entry being dropped super low. So now people who would never have their book published have the means to get their book, using digital printing or something like that, being able to do small print runs at a reasonable cost, going straight to Kickstarter. And then you have exceptional artists and creators who they were working with a publisher and they were just like, hey, I have a project, but it's special to me. And I want to own it completely. And, what I look forward to is a day where, us and maybe a handful of other publishers with a similar mindset can have a free exchange of what, books are maybe published with us. So, we work closely with other publishers and help them with Kickstarters or, share resources and tips and things like that. And certainly if any of them I thought was a better fit for one of our books, like I'd be like, hey, I think you should push this book out with that publisher because they're going to do, a better job, or, they have the market share on the thing that you're making right now. And that's my dream of a utopian future for, the indie comic scene. And I don't think we're that far away from it.
No, I don't actually. No, not at all. Because especially when I go to a lot of the Comic Cons around me, I'm seeing a lot of folks out there putting out like their first title, or they started like a company, a small press, what have you. I'm definitely seeing, I think, more like initiative out there. People are seeing like the opportunity and then saying, okay, you know what? Now I'm going to do this thing. Now I'm going to publish my comic, and come hell or high water, it's going to get out there.
Yeah, and the scene has been just so overwhelmingly supportive. There's always some discussions you hear here and there about toxicity in the scene and stuff like that, but generally that hasn't been our experience. I actually had a phone call last night with a creator by the name of Dan Price. He does Bigfoot Knows Karate. If you've never seen that book, it's amazing. And he's one of the ones that he's not publishing with us. The exchange of ideas and stuff like that is so open. There's no trade secrets and stuff like that. And that's the case with a bunch of other, folks. Tardigrade Press, they're up in Canada. They're amazing people. We do that type of exchange as well. Sovereign Comics, he's Tier Jackson's out in Colorado. So that part's really encouraging, especially like one of two things will happen. You are clueless to how to solve a problem, and you can access that network and be like, hey guys, I should know the answer to this, and at this point I'm too embarrassed to ask in public, so let me ask this like group of folks. Or the other one where sometimes you just have a crap day. Making comics is hard, and there's setbacks and there's disappointments and things like that, and it's just it really recharges your battery when you're able to just, talk shop with another creator and they're like, yeah, I've been there. I know exactly what you're going through. And, this was, my experience. And, you find a lot of community in that.
What's been the hardest part about not only like starting LKC, but just like keeping it going and growing it?
I think it's probably been expectation management, and then also learning one, how to start your own company, how to, manage your time and do those things. I experienced huge burnout, maybe a month ago, where it was just like, you can only wake up so early and you can only stay up so late. And then you end up being like agitated, you're not fun to be around. And your wife starts giving you the side eye. And then like, that's a bad place to be. Also when it's your own business, you don't really have work hours. Every hour is a work hour, and finding a time to say, I know I don't want to disappoint somebody, and I know we're not going to make a deadline if I put down, my phone or close the computer or whatever, but that's just where we are, and, and I think, we built a team that's, got a lot of empathy, and I'm like, hugely grateful to that, because it's like, I feel like I'm like, you imagine like talking all your friends into a road trip. Hey, we're gonna pile 14 people in the van, and you get halfway through the Midwest, and then you're like, I got to pull over and sleep for 3 days, and they're like, what the fuck? I'm out here in, God knows where. This is, you told me to get in this van, and, but luckily, the team is amazingly patient and supportive.
I can definitely relate to the burnout. Like, it is so easy to just like work through the whole day and into the night, and before you know it's like, oh, I've been working for like 16 hours straight. Well, do it again tomorrow,
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I think some of the other parts too is having reasonable expectations for yourself, and we have access to so much data, right? So no matter how well you do, there's always somebody who's got more followers, their Kickstarter's doing better, they're, and you never know the backstory. You don't know if one person is working on that or 10 people are working on it. You don't know all the reasons why something is a success or a failure. I'm always still astounded when people reach out to us and it's like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a publishing company. Like, how did you guys do it so successfully? And I'm like, dude, I feel like this is like a dumpster fire, like on the sinking, like Titanic ship sometimes, like all I can tell you are the things that I would never do again, but I'm sure there's probably somebody that I'm looking at where I'm just like, I want to be where you're at. And they probably feel the exact same way.
Definitely, man. Definitely. All right. So we talked a bit about a Kickstarter, and of course, you guys have been doing these before. How do you kind of view the response, though, the fact that you set the goal and then you like totally smashed it?
I think that's a tricky place, to where to set the goal, because in many ways the goal is almost like arbitrary. And I think the goal at this point is more about, with every successive Kickstarter, to just try and bring in, a couple more new viewers or a couple new readers. And, I talked to a buddy of mine who's another one I reach out to for support. He did a Kickstarter that did $63,000, right? And I was like, Isaac, how, like once again, how do I get, and he was like, you're where you need to be right now. He's like, here are the fundamentals. You keep doing that. The next one will do a little bit better. The next one will do a little better. Some will feel like a setback, but you can't really control for that. There's so many variables out there. But I think, the biggest metric, I want to lean on are we making new books, and are more people reading them than were before? I think the other stuff is helpful, metrics, but they're not as meaningful, and certainly you can go down some bad paths if you pay attention too much to, this many, we have this many followers on social media, or this particular campaign did X number of dollars more or less than the last.
Agreed. Yeah, I got actually a buddy of mine who does game design, and he did a Kickstarter a while back, and unfortunately, it did not meet the goal, and so that I think was a real blow to his just like self confidence. Does that ever kind of like get into your head? Like, is this thing actually going to become like a real big success story?
I think I have two answers for that. So logically, when I think through it, I think that I have a ton of confidence in our success in the 3 to 5 year term. And one of the things I'm, most worried about is just making sure that we get there in a way that we feel good about ourselves and we feel good about the relationships we have. Because there's ways to get there where you can take shortcuts and you can, burn bridges and things like that. but is success worth it? If you can't look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. But in terms of that self-doubt and imposter syndrome, yeah, I mean, the illogical voice in the back of my head that's like yelling at me every day, like, what are you doing? You're crazy. This is never going to work, and everyone's going to hate you, and like, blah, blah, and like, you're going to burn you in effigy, at Comic-Con or that voice says some messed up things, and it's hard to turn it off, but a lot of people, kind of, struggle with that too.
Ray, you mentioned this earlier, so I did want to kind of ask you too. How do you sort of cope with the anxiety? Oh, I'm not good enough. This is never going to work. How do you sort of like move past that?
Well, I find that my imposter syndrome is balanced out by my superiority complex.
That's healthy, I think. I think
it's a healthy balance of checks and balances that I keep to myself. But no, I mean, like, it's like Mark says, I mean, that voice is always there, but you got to kind of like realize and be self-aware that it is just in your head. I mean, before reaching out to Mark, I started my own Kickstarter for Tag McGreggor, and it didn't make its goal. Again, like for whatever reason, I got told, you didn't promote it enough beforehand, you didn't reach enough people, et cetera, et cetera. And it's true. I mean, I didn't reach enough people. I tried my best. I did everything I knew how to do on my own to try to get, and it was just me basically and my wife helping me out, and it didn't make it. And once it didn't make it, I was like, obviously it was a huge, like you said, it's like a huge blow to my ego, and should I have been doing this? But like almost immediately I was like, no, fuck that, fuck them, fuck the world. I'm going to do this anyway. And I just put my own money in it, and I had made it happen. And, I just kind of like in high gear. And before I know it, I'm talking to Mark, and now we're doing a Kickstarter round 2 for Tag McGreggor. And it already got funded. Like, to me, it's like, wow, cool. That's amazing. And basically all I needed was a bigger microphone, which is what Mark provided me. But yeah, it's I am a very anxious person, and it is something I have to deal with on a daily basis. So yeah, I don't know if I handle it well.
One of the things that I try and remember, I still dabble in music, but when I was younger, I was really into the music scene, and played shows every weekend and everything like that. And we were playing venues with 200, 300, 400 kids, and I should have enjoyed it more, but instead I was like this like big sourpuss about it, just being like, well, why aren't we, playing, 1,000-person venue? And why aren't we on, and how come our new record isn't done? This, that, and the other thing. And trying to be more present and being like, enjoying the stages that we're at right now. Because a lot of people's fondest memories are back before they, had any money or had, any, those, creature comforts that we, talk about, right? When you were like, one of my favorite summers was like couch surfing with, some friends, like when, things were not great, so, there's definitely places to be grateful and to enjoy, even during your setbacks.
Well said. I'd like to ask you both, what was your first comic that you ever owned?
Feel like it was this Iron Man comic that my mom brought home. My mom's a teacher. And she brought it home one day because it was like in her library or one of her kids. She confiscated it from one of the kids or whatever. And this was way before the MCU or Iron Man even became a movie. I knew of Iron Man because he had appeared like in a Spider-Man episode. So I knew of Iron Man, and I didn't really much care for him. And the episode was very weird. It had to do with like, the issue was very weird. It had to do with like suicide, and it was one of the heavier episodes, and it was like already started. So, and it wasn't like finished. So it was like there's just one issue that I would just keep reading over and over and not really understand what was happening in it. But I was really liking the drawings. The first one that I just genuinely purposefully went out and bought was A Dame to Kill For by Frank Miller.
Ooh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mark, your turn.
Mine was it's funny that you said Iron Man, because mine was a War Machine ash can.
Oh, nice.
And I wish I held on to it too, because that was, us old farts, right? So like, remember when comics were in the grocery store and you could bug your mom at checkout, right? Like, oh, please, 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 please. And so even though it was War Machine, I remember there was a splash page at the end where he's kind of standing looking at all these villains, and there was a bunch of the X-Men villains in there, and X-Men was always my jam. That's the one that I like zeroed in on right after, and I'm still to this day obsessed with anything X-Men. I haven't gotten to much of the new stuff because I've been spending so much time catching up on. I had the revelation, recently that I was like, oh, I can afford comics now. Like, as a kid, like it was always something out of reach. So I've literally found a website that put every single X-Men related release in chronological timeline order. So like I'm in the 1950s right now, working my way through.
Nice.
Excellent. Yeah. For me, it was, and I actually still have this comic. It was Avengers West Coast, and this was back in like the 90s, I think. I found this in an old antique store in my hometown, and it was them taking on Magneto. And this was like really like old school, like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch were still with like the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Was in no way like a pivotal storyline, but that was my first comic. I read it like a billion times over. And Mark, I was that kid in the grocery store by the racks, just reading everything they had every single week.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I wish they still had that. We've kind of broken the comic market, and that's why we're not attracting new readers.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would like to see is them to bring them back, but to also, along with like on the Marvel and the DC and all like the big titles, include like some like indie comics too.
Yeah, there's some places like where comics are making some headway, whether it's skate shops, bong shops, and places like that. And I did a drive to visit our printer Comics Wellspring. They're out in Michigan. I live in DC. I was originally from California, but I live in DC. So I was like, I'm going to drive, meet our printer in person, and I'm going to stop at every comic book shop, like kind of on the way. We visited 32 comic book shops on that road trip. And, a lot of people have that idea of like, the comic book shop that's like windowless, dark room with the stacks and like, just like the cranky old guy behind the counter. And those are still out there, but I'm seeing a lot more places where, like especially in the Great Lakes region, where it's a coffee shop or a craft beer, and they got comics, and they got tabletop games in the upstairs, and it's a whole like wonderland of nerd culture. It's really cool and surprising the amount of stores that weren't struggling, even like these were COVID times, like that were telling me, oh, we actually just took the lease for the building next door because we have to expand. It's things are going great for us. And Comics Wellspring, they are actually a subsidiary of a bigger printing company. They're small, they're like family owned, but they credit indie comics for getting them through the pandemic, because people weren't printing business cards and things for conventions and things like that. And they were like, but all these indie comics orders keep coming in, So, I think, I think that's been really, really cool to see.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's actually a comic shop down the street from my apartment that opened in July of 2020. I was there on the first day, dropped like $100, and I was there like week after week after week, just buying like more stuff. And I'm not sure how well the guy's doing in general, but I imagine he had a really good first year because there was nothing else to do. You couldn't go anywhere, nothing was open. So I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go buy comics. So yeah, I mean the stores I think did really well because there's just that like lack of anything else.
Yeah, comic book stores, I've said this a few times. It's most retail places you go into, right? And if you have like an obscure question or something, right? Um, the level of expertise in those retail spaces is typically like pretty minimal, right? There's no like old dude, in the back where they're like, oh, we'll ask Chuck, he's been here for 70 years and he knows everything. Like that only exists, in rare places, and comic book shops are one of those, right? Where it's pretty hard to stump a comic book shop owner, with an obscure question. Because if they don't know it, they're going to call this shop, down the street or in the other part of the city. And I think that's really cool and really unique. And it's one of the retail places that a owner's recommendation it carries so much weight, right? Like, you always feel like this grimy ulterior motive when like a person tells you, oh, you got to try this new thing, right? But like in comic shop, if your comic book shop owner is like, hey, did you get the new issue of, then you're like, oh, it's got to be good because this person doesn't, mince words typically.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. The shop near me, they do a lot of really cool indie stuff, and that's like the first place I go at. I enjoy Marvel, I enjoy DC, but yeah, like the indie rack is like the first thing I check out because I want to see what else is out there. So, want to ask about LKC's plans for 2022 and also next year. I imagine you have a lot of like new releases lined up, but do you think you'll also be making some appearances at Comic Cons?
Yeah, I think we did LA Comic Con, which was a big hit for us. We have a lot of creators that are in the LA, Southern California area. So one, it was really cool to get like six of us that had never really met before, in one place. And then one of the advantages of having such a big team is that we were the busiest booth in the artist alley because we could have somebody on the table and somebody standing in front of the table and being like, hey, you want to free bookmark or this that, and like pulling people in. We were also featuring Digital Lizards of Doom at the time, which is a really strong title. When it comes to like right now, we're not doing as many cons as we want because we've been focusing on growing our Kickstarter game. But certainly we want to be doing more conventions. Greater Austin Comic Con, which is in July, right? Right?
Yeah,
Drag me out.
I believe it's in July. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna drag me out to Austin, the hottest month of the year.
It's just 105 degrees.
I was actually talking to somebody today about Texas, and he was his first time there, and he said, "Is this where the sun lives? Like when when it goes away from everywhere else, it just stays here,
Not to divert your topic too far, but having grown up like in Texas or like in the border with Texas and Mexico, I like 99 degrees and all that is like pretty normal. I prefer the heat, but like nothing's ever going to compare to this one time that I got off the plane in Qatar. And that was like, I had never felt anything like that in my life. Where it's just like the heat was like, whoa. I'm like, whoa, this is where the sun rests.
Oh man! All right, and new releases. What do you have in the works?
We actually have our batches planned through February of next year. So we're deciding whether it's going to be on a 7 or 8 week schedule, where the Kickstarter runs for essentially 4 weeks, and then we got 3 weeks of downtime to, fulfill all the orders and then get the next one launched. So it's pretty ambitious, but the good news is that most of the books are done or like in pre-pub, where maybe they're just getting edits or they're with our graphic designer and just getting, those final things worked out. So we've released up to LKC number 7. We have through LKC 13 done. We have an anthology collection of that one as well that has like these cool tarot card covers. We're kind of in that universe, pulling in the magic, we actually have like a tarot card deck that's being developed by a guy who has a PhD in the history and practice of witchcraft, and really interesting dude. He actually induces a like a psychedelic trance before he actually does the art. So it's not just like one of a kind, but like he not only can the art not be created again, but that trance like, and then our creator-owned series, Digital Lizards of Doom, book 4 is well on its way. Ray said, he's pretty far into Tank McGreggor 2, and the next issue of the Hara is completed, and then a few other titles that are out of that lesser known comics like universe, where so Death Wish issue number 2 is all penciled and partially inked, so it's pretty close. And then one of the spin-off series is called Kaijo City. It's samurais versus witches in 1980s Japan. So that one is all inked and mostly colored. So it's just a matter of booking them into each of the batches. So we have through batch 9, which would be the first one of 2023. So we have, after batch 4, we got if my math doesn't mistake me, it is 4 more batches before the end of the year. So that's the plan right now.
That's a great plan. I love that plan. Well, Mark and Ray, thank you both so much for joining me. I've loved talking about this thing. Folks, if you don't know, now you know. You go to lesserknowncomics.com. You'll find everything you need there. Follow their socials, like them, comment them, check out the comics. You can check them out, some of them for free, but you should definitely buy them too. You should definitely buy them and go to your local comic shop. Don't have something, tell them to order it, and get yourself some lesser known comics. Guys, before we go though, your own socials, chuck them out there so folks know where to find you and check out your works.
So lesserknowncomics.com, right there on the front page, there's the direct link to the Batch 4 Kickstarter that features Tank McGregor, Death Wish, and Goodnight. We got a lot of stuff on globalcomics.com that's for free. We try and give as much of the digital stuff away for free as possible. And then on Instagram at Lesser Known Comics. Same thing. Facebook is Lesser Known Comics, and Twitter is Lesser K Comics. We did the best we could on that one.
And you can find me mainly surfing around in Instagram. I post most of my Tank McGregor stuff on at Tank McGregor Comic. That's mainly where you can find me right now, and on Facebook, Tank McGregor, and those are my 2 main ones.
Excellent. Well, guys, I'm loving the comics, and I definitely cannot wait to read whatever comes next. So, thanks again.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
This is Angelina Singer, author of the Upper World series, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout, the best podcast for independent artists.
Okay, everyone, that brings this episode to a close. Big thanks to Mark and Ray for joining me, and definitely check out Lesser Known Comics. No matter your genre of choice, you are going to find something you like there, I guarantee it. You can follow the show on Facebook under Citywide Blackout, and Twitter and Instagram under Citywide Max. Get a me at citywidemax@yahoo.com, and check out the show wherever you find podcasts, as well as every Saturday at 10 p.m. on Boston Free Radio. As always, keep those ears open.